At this time of year, we can be thinking about practical or material things that we can be doing to improve our life, whether we want to start going to the gym, start a new hobby. But in this video, I want to focus on mindset shifts that will be the foundation to all of the goals that you want to achieve this year. We're talking about how to up-level your mindset in 2025 in this coming year. We're going to go through all these mindset shifts that you can make. The timestamps will be in the description. The first one is to make decisions from love and not from fear. And this is really difficult because fear exists everywhere. If you want to be yourself, you can be scared that people won't accept you and you're being real. So there's nothing really to hide behind. You're like, this is me. And if people don't accept me, that's a rejection, you know? Because if you're trying to just like play along with what everyone else wants and they don't like you, you could be like, well, they didn't see the real me, right? But if you're just being yourself and showing up authentically as you and people aren't accepting you, that's going to hurt more, right? There's always going to be fear. But if you can try and start at least observing this, if you have like a decision to make, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, it could just be in small things. Are you doing something because you're scared of something else, or are you doing something out of love or passion or trust or like following your intuition? So like a really good example of this is when you can recognize on some level that a friendship or a relationship is not good for you anymore. There can be all kinds of reasons, but maybe you can just tell like, this isn't supposed to be, this isn't for me, and you're scared to leave it. So you stay. Things aren't going well, and it's because in your heart or in your soul, you know, I should have ducked out earlier. This isn't for me, and yet I'm staying out of fear because I'm scared that if I leave this person, will I find someone else who understands me? Will I be okay being by myself for a while? There's uncertainty there. I don't know what's going to happen. So maybe then you're making the decision to stay with this person because that's predictable and familiar, even if it's not what you want. You will know. If I'm saying this and this is like registering in you, that means that there's maybe some work to be done on this thing of making decisions from love instead of from fear. But it's really difficult, right? But if you at least start observing yourself doing this, either in big things like friendships or relationships, or just in small ways of like deciding you're going to spend an evening by yourself instead of going out with your friends, like there can be FOMO there. You can be like, oh, am I going to miss out on something if I don't go? Don't just decide to go because you're scared of not going. You're scared of missing out if you don't go. What do you need? And we're going to talk about like how to listen to your intuition and listen to what you really need a bit later. This is a good one to get started with. Make decisions from love, not from fear. The next mindset shift is to move more into an abundance-based mindset. They all work nicely together. This one works with the previous one because instead of being in the scarcity mindset of, if I leave this friendship, am I going to find another close friend like this, someone who relates to me on this level? Or if I leave this romantic relationship, am I going to find someone else who wants to be with me? That's being in scarcity, right? Being in fear and thinking like there's no one else out there for me. Even if this isn't the right thing for me, there's nothing else out there. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? But we can get caught up in this. Instead, adopting an abundance mindset of the right person is out there for me. I will find another friendship like this. This was for a season. It's drawn to a close now for whatever reason. Maybe you're recognizing that they have like some really toxic patterns, or they're really triggering to be around, or there's just like some unease. Maybe you can't bring up things that you'd love to talk about because you know that they will make them uncomfortable, or they won't give you the support that you really need, right? Like, there are so many reasons. It's so complicated. In the same way we were saying don't make decisions from fear, don't make decisions from lack if we're talking about an abundance mindset. Even with money, I can find this. I'll be spending money out of fear of not having money in the future. So I'll be like, oh, I really like this mouthwash or like this perfume, and I have enough of it now, but I'm scared that I won't have enough money to buy this thing in the future. So let me just buy a couple now because I have the money now. That could make financial sense if there's like a special offer on 2 for the price of 1 or whatever. Then yeah, if it's something that you know that you like and you use, to spend money on it now is cheaper than to buy 2 in the future when you need them. Just observe like where that impulse is coming from. Are you trying to like cover over your fear of lack by saying, oh, but look, it's a really good deal? Because a lot of this stuff can be really sneaky, and you might think one thing, but if you try and like get to the root of it underneath, you'll realize that under the surface there is that fear, there is that lack. And for me, I feel like I'm constantly in this cycle of unpacking fear, unpacking lack. Try not to limit yourself and try to think that anything is possible. Try to have like this open mindset of like ready to receive. And as well, if we're going to talk about spirituality later, but if you pray and if you have some connection with God, you can remember that God will always take care of you. So you are spending this money out of fear of lack in the future. Like, okay, I can afford this now, but like I need to buy some now to like make sure that I have this stocked up because I may not have it in the future. Remember, God will take care of you. You don't need to be obsessing about the future or being like, oh my gosh, will I be able to afford this then? Or I need this thing or whatever. It's like, no, are you good now? have you been taken care of now? I feel like I have to add so many different caveats because I know that sometimes we can be in situations where we aren't taken care of and we're like, why am I here? Why is this not working? And there are so many like structural issues that mean that a lot of us are running around living in fear and scarcity because that's literally our surroundings. So this is like a really delicate topic to talk about. Even if your situation is a certain way, your mindset is going to affect the way that you view that situation and the way you move through it. Being caught in this lack or this fear, this scarcity is going to make things more difficult for you mentally. So just trying to trust a bit more, which I know is a whole other thing, but trying to trust that things will improve, trying to lean more into abundance. And even if you don't have the thing yet, that thing exists somewhere and it is making its way to you, and anything is possible. I think having a growth mindset, that's a really big shift. Instead of viewing things either as a personal attack, if you're like given feedback or someone tries to have a difficult conversation with you, instead of immediately being like, oh my gosh, how dare they say that, and being fixed in where you are now, be open to that and be like, oh, okay, this person is trying to raise this point with me. How can I respond? Don't immediately go into your ego and get defensive. And a lot of this stuff is about becoming aware of things going on in our heads, which is really difficult when someone is bringing up a topic that makes us really reactive because we bypass the thinking and go straight into like the emotional reaction, whether that is anger or being hurt or lashing out, right? Like this stuff is all quite complicated. I would really recommend journaling in terms of making sense of your emotions, but parts work can also be really helpful. The book No Bad Parts explains this really well and gives you different exercises to go through. It helps you unpack different protector parts within yourself, helps you understand why you might be self-sabotaging, why you keep being stuck in the same destructive patterns. There could be a part of you that thinks that this is the way we deal with things, and so you're getting caught in that because you've not told that part, you're safe now, I've got this, right? And it's about like then building trust within yourself. It's a whole process, and these things are all linked but it is possible, and that's the next point. But in terms of this growth mindset, also just always be learning. Instead of thinking badly about yourself, it's recognizing that there is so much out there, like you couldn't possibly learn all of it, but just being open to it and being like, yes, I'm ready to learn. Okay, this thing has been brought up. I don't have to then feel inadequate or like I don't know enough or I feel silly for not knowing something or not understanding something. It's like, no, great, this is an opportunity. Instead of an opportunity to make myself feel bad and feel less than, this is an opportunity to learn and to grow and to view difficult situations, whether at work or in friendships, view these difficult things as an opportunity as opposed to something that's going to hold you back or something that reminds you of all this negative stuff about yourself. The next shift that is really important and will help you this year is to truly believe that change is possible. So I mentioned parts work. That can really help you change because it's getting to the root of your emotional problems and understanding why you act the way you do now. And that is how you're going to bring about lasting change, because once you understand the motivations of all these different parts within you, then you can work with those parts to get what you want now. So if you're like constantly setting goals and then not hitting them, it could be that there are some unresolved things, some self-sabotage, some different behaviors that are holding you back. And in terms of change is possible, it's really, I understand how easy it is to dismiss this because I can do this. And yet every day I'm a reminder that change is possible, because this time 3 years ago, I was really deep in my addiction and it was a really dark time. Now I have been sober for nearly 3 years. Even though I know change is possible because my life today looks very different to how it did 3 years ago, it's really easy to put myself down or to think that I can't do things, even though I know I can. And I know that big change is possible because it literally felt impossible to stop drinking. And yet here I am, like I've been able to do that and to make that change. This is one that will need constant reminders of, and if you don't have like an example in your life in the same way that I'm talking about, then it can be difficult. You can make a big change. Like there are so many stories of change, of people who've changed things in their life. Whatever unhealthy pattern you're stuck in, it doesn't have to be that way. Change is possible, and believing that it's possible is one of the first steps to then making the change yourself. So just keep reminding yourself of this as you're trying to work on like changing your relationship dynamics or your attachment style, you know, working on that, or working at things in your career or financially. If you've been stuck in the same pattern for so long, it can be really easy to think like this is just the way I am. But no, it's probably just a pattern that is fulfilling a deeper need. And once you address that and address that deeper need in other healthier ways that can help you get to your goal, then things can change. Change is possible for anyone, no matter what it is we're talking about. It is possible. The next thing is an attitude of gratitude. This has been really helpful in my recovery. This is a really life-changing one, and it's so easy to do. Just start writing a gratitude list every day. Write 3 things. Write a list on your phone. You can pray your gratitude list at the end of the day and say, thank you, God, for this. Today I'm grateful to be sober. I'm grateful for my cozy bed. I'm grateful for my cup of tea. I'm grateful for the food I had today. I'm grateful for the really interesting book I'm reading, right? Like, it becomes really easy the more you do this. You can just find things to be grateful for, and you will really feel the gratitude. So at the start when you do this, it might feel just like you're listing things and you don't really care. You're like, okay, I need to find things to be grateful for. So like, I'm grateful the sun came out today, or I'm grateful for the books that I have, or the nice shower I had this evening. It may not actually connect with a feeling, but if you keep doing this, at least this was my experience, it's like a switch gets flipped, and then you are able to be not only seeing things to be grateful for, but you're connecting it with the feeling of gratitude. And then it becomes this virtuous circle, because you're always able to find something to be grateful for, even in a difficult situation. Even if you're feeling rubbish, you can be like, okay, but truly I feel grateful for my sobriety, or I feel grateful for this nice Parmesan cheese that I've put on top of my beans for dinner, right? Like, it can be really the small things, but you will actually feel it. And this attitude of gratitude is so powerful. You carry it with you through anything. Even if you're having the worst day at work, you will still be able to be like, well, I'm grateful for my job because it provides me with the money to fund my lifestyle. And it actually gets to a point where you get annoyed at yourself, because it's not that you don't let yourself be sad, but it's more just that even if you are having that annoying day, there will be this little voice in your head being like, yeah, but I still am grateful for this job. Even though I'm so annoyed at everyone, or even though I'm having a really bad day that's unrelated to the job and I'm just annoyed that I have to show up for work today because I'm dealing with all this other stuff. Even though all of that, I am really grateful for this job though. It's a really interesting shift, and I really hope you try this out because it is really powerful. The next thing is to build more acceptance in your life. This is a tricky one, but I have, for example, had to accept my addiction, and that this is just like who I am now, apparently, even though I'm sober. But like, this is something that is ongoing, that I have to manage. And that is really difficult to accept. And maybe you're in a certain living situation that's difficult to accept, or you have health problems that are difficult to accept. It's not saying that it's okay. Like, if you accept something, that doesn't mean you condone it and you're like, I'm happy with this. That's not what acceptance is, because that's what I thought it was for a while. I was like, but I can't accept this because that means that I'm happy with it. But it's more allowing yourself to accept the circumstances of your life, whichever ones are bothering you at the moment that you can't accept. Allowing yourself to accept those things means that you're not fighting them anymore, and you can then make progress. So instead of me fighting my nature, or fighting like who I am basically, or who I've become being in recovery, instead of me fighting that, I'm like, okay, I accept that. This is obviously not the life I would have chosen for myself, but I can accept that. And now what can I do? What can I do with this now? I can move through life more honestly because I've accepted who I am. I can help other people who struggle with the same thing because I've accepted who I am. Put my energy onto other things instead of obsessing over this, or like overthinking this, or wondering why, questioning why all the time. I don't have to do any of that because I've accepted who I am and what this means for my life. It's a really powerful thing, but it's really difficult to do because there are some things that we don't want to accept, especially like living under a system that doesn't pay us enough or puts our value in what we do as opposed to who we are. I find that really difficult to accept because I'm like, that's not how I think things should be. Yet this is the prevailing view, and not only of our society, but also in terms of the way other people act. We absorb this message that being productive is good, and that's not to say that being productive is bad, but it's more just like, if you're not productive for a day, that doesn't mean you're a bad person, or just because you are productive for a day, that doesn't mean you're a good person. And you might be like, well, duh, but there are a lot of people who seem to think that your productivity is directly tied to your value, that resting is bad, or that if you can't work, that's a bad thing. And it's like, you're made for so much more. So I find it difficult to accept that system and the values that come along with it because it is so deeply ingrained in our culture. But accepting it is the only way of then doing something about it. Instead of fighting myself and constantly overthinking and, you know, wishing things were different, by struggling to accept things, once I've accepted it, I can then move on and like do something about it. Or I can just coexist, right? Like just live with it and be like, okay, I recognize, I have this awareness that this is not the way that things would ideally be in my world, but I've accepted that this is the way it is. It just brings you this sense of peace and of being grounded, and helps you with all the other things we've talked about so far to actually look forward and be like, okay, where do I go from here? What action can I take? As opposed to just being caught up in either feeling really bad or thinking things and just being stuck in your head. I mentioned spirituality earlier. I think this is an interesting thing to introduce into this kind of mindset video. Basically just about widening your perspective. I think it's really helpful. A really good book if you want to get started with this kind of thing is Inventing the Universe by Alistair McGrath. I love this book so much. It's a perfect combination of science and religion, science and Christianity. It's so interesting. I'm not a science person in terms of like at school I was not good at sciences, but I do find especially like space and astrology, really interesting. I have like a universe book that talks all about different stars. I love looking at the stars. All of last week we had clear nights and I was literally just sat on my bed listening to music and looking at the stars, and I find it to be so peaceful. So while I'm not a sciencey person, I do love space. And so this book, Inventing a Universe, is a really good starting point because it's really accessible, but it's talking about all of these different discoveries in science and maths throughout history, tying that into different Christian ideas and different things that are said in the Bible. I highly recommend that book. Looking at the stars, also I would recommend anyone do, because that's free. Wait for a clear night and look out your window. You can pray, get your Bible out, get a devotional out. You probably have one somewhere if you grew up with this. So have a look at that. Just anything to get a bigger perspective and a sense of a wider story of history. So even just start like reading history books, like reading about like different people's experiences in different times, or reading different biographies even. Or if you don't like reading, then watching different films of, there are so many different documentaries. I really recommend Adam Curtis's documentaries. I did a whole video about his film Hypernormalization. I will link that video. I love that film so much. It's just about like reframing things, getting a different perspective of things, getting historical context for the times we live in now. I just find this is really, for me, I find that kind of background really helpful to like understand the system we live in now, or understand geopolitics now. Spirituality and connecting with God also really powerful in terms of like moving forward, or understanding your purpose, or understanding how you relate to other people, or understanding the bigger context of your life and the things that really matter, as opposed to getting caught up in appearances or like competition on social media. That leads us to the next point, which is comparison. And stop comparing. This is a difficult shift because it's so easy to compare. And I know some people be like, well, just delete Instagram, like delete Facebook. Yeah, I don't go on Facebook anymore. I have my Instagram that's connected to this channel, but my personal Instagram, I don't even know the login for that anymore. So I don't actually follow anyone who I know on Instagram. I'm following people who are sharing, fashion content or lifestyle content or whatever, but I'm not following like my friends, which is maybe weird, but I just found it wasn't helpful to be comparing myself to, this person's going on holiday, or these people are going on holiday without me. It's like, it's kind of none of my business, right? Like, it's not my life. If I'm not involved, then it's none of my business, right? And if you want to go that route of like deleting social media, I think that could be really helpful, because as well, even if we're not following our friends, like I said, I'm not following people I know, but I can still then compare myself to people I don't know, because I'm like, oh my gosh, look, that person's house is so tidy, or they're always posting these really uplifting things. They must be such a positive person. And even though we know that social media is not the full picture, even if people are posting like those side by sides of like what you see versus what you don't, like a messy room versus the clean room that they show on Instagram, even if they're showing that, there's still going to be things that they aren't showing, in terms of like they get really upset when they've just had a fight with someone, or they had some really disturbing health news, right? People aren't sharing everything, and I know even the people who look like they're sharing everything, they will still be holding things back. So there's basically no point in comparing, and we know that, but it's still so easy to fall into that trap. And it's also then putting your value again in what you do, or what you own, or the way that you present yourself to the world, as opposed to just who you are, because you're then like being performative. You're participating in this culture that is saying like, look at this, I did this, I have this, which is fine to a point, but it's not really the point, which is what we talked about in the last point. I love using a word in different ways. It's not really the point. So if you just focus on your own path, the things that you have overcome, your own timeline, what you want to do, what you are drawn to do, this is going to be the way to get those things done that you want to get done this year. In terms of the things you're drawn to, this leads us on to the next point, which is about learning to trust your intuition, which we talked about at the beginning. This is something you will learn to do through practice. This is talked about a lot in the book Untamed by Glennon and Doyle. I've been meaning to reread this book for a long time. That is definitely a book I would recommend if you want to learn about how to trust yourself, how to tap into your intuition and like listen to yourself and work out what is the right thing for you to do. But I would say a really easy starting point, aside from reading that book, a really easy way to do this if you have a cycle is to start to cycle sync. Cycle syncing is being aware of where you're at in your cycle and planning in advance so that you're making the most of each thing, or so that you're giving yourself what you need during each point. So if you're in your follicular phase, you might have more energy or you will, I certainly will have more energy than when you're in your late luteal phase. So when I'm in my late luteal phase, I really need to be alone a lot of the time because I'm going to be quite irritable and I might end up snapping at people and then regretting it and then feeling guilty and feeling ashamed and whatever. So I know that's going to happen. So I make sure that I have a lot of time to chill. I don't put big deadlines or pressure on myself. A lot of this I know is out of our control. If you have a job you have to commute to or a job you don't like, that's obviously going to take up a lot of your time. But for me, because I work from home, I'm able to manage more things in my environment. If it's possible, you could ask at least part-time or a few days a week if you could work from home, because I found it makes a big difference, especially with something like cycle syncing. It just gives you a bit more flexibility. So I know in my late luteal phase, I need to rest. I know my emotions can be really big and difficult to deal with. So what I can do is schedule some movie nights. So I write down films that I want to watch. And then when it gets to the point where I am feeling really terrible and I know that I'm in my late luteal phase, I'm like, wait, let's have a movie night. Let's put on something that we've been wanting to watch, something that is absorbing, interesting plot. I mentioned the Adam Curtis documentaries. They are perfect, right? For me, if that's the kind of thing you like, if you like those like geopolitical documentaries, that is the perfect thing to put on because it's distracting, it's interesting, I'm learning something, I love it. It's learning how to manage your emotions, but also when I'm in those difficult times and I know that my feelings get so big and horrible and I can feel all of these like self-loathing things or feeling guilty or feeling just like I'm a terrible person and all of this stuff, I know that those things will pass. And so cycle syncing then is teaching me how to care for myself and how to listen to what my body needs. Because if I am feeling scattered and all over the place, it's like, okay, what we need now is rest. If I'm feeling tired or annoyed and irritable, what I need to do is to calm down, like reevaluate, sit by myself and not engage with things that I know will stress me out. If possible, obviously. Learning how to manage my mood, learning how to listen to what I need. Cycle syncing is definitely a thing I would highly, highly recommend. Aside from that, ways you can tap into your intuition. If you have an idea, especially creatively, if you have an idea, just go with it, right? Don't wait until you have like the right pens to draw something. Like if you are suddenly inspired to paint something, use what you have and go for it. If you were inspired to go for a walk, just whatever you feel drawn to do, act on that impulse immediately, because there's something in you that's like, I am craving the peace that I would get from going for a long walk and listening to a podcast. I'm craving the ability to express myself through drawing this picture, or I would really like to watch this show because it will distract me from my current situation. Not overthinking anything, but just being like, okay, this is what I want to do, let's do this and see what happens. This is just one thing, like it's such a complicated topic, trusting your intuition. But I hope these mindset shifts have got you started and given you a lot to think about. I hope they help you prepare well for the coming year and the things that you want to achieve. These are things that I have learned and I'm implementing this year with high hopes for the coming year, or, you know, reasonable hopes. I don't want to like let myself down or have too high expectations, but what is within my control, I'm going to do. On my channel, I talk all about mindset and habits and mental health. So if you've liked this video, please subscribe. God bless. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.